Hey everyone, welcome back to the Caregiving and Entrepreneurship Reimagined podcast. I'm your caregiver coach and business coach and podcast host, Melissa Miller. And it has been a while. Sorry for my silence, but the spring has just been insane for me and my family. My daughter got sick a couple times, and then I ended up getting sick with both flu and pneumonia, and that has derailed me for like the last couple months. And then on top of that, I had some tech issues. My computer crashed, so it's like, it's just like it snowballed into multiple things just happening all at once. But I am back. I have some amazing guests coming up this month, so definitely make sure that you are liking, following, and subscribing to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, my blog, and YouTube to be up to date on new episodes and content. But today, I am very excited to introduce my guest because I don't know about you, but I have always struggled personally with stress and anxiety. And obviously, as a caregiver, that stress is just compounded and has been just exacerbated even more. And I think it's really important to understand how stress just affects your body. And I love that my guest, Jeanne Retief, has used her own journey with stress and a panic disorder to use it for good with the skin kit, with body friendly self skin products to help you with managing your skin to keep it healthy and strong. That doesn't then exacerbate your body in other ways. And just understanding that, self care is all facets. It's skin, it's heart, it's mental, it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's mental. All areas are important. And so I'm so excited to have Jeanne on the podcast today. So, Jeanne, thank you so much for blocking us some time, working with me on the schedules to make this happen because I really wanted you to be on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, my listeners may not be familiar with your work and what you do and your own personal stories. So, could you just start sharing a little bit about your journey with what you've been through with your own health and then how that kind of translated into the work you do now?
Sure. So, my expertise is in international human rights and humanitarian law. And after I was diagnosed with panic disorder, I had to kind of leave that career behind and focus on my health and my well-being and getting back into a good space. And that's how Figgy Beauty was born. It's my skincare line focused on dry and sensitive skin that reacts that way due to anxiety and the connection between the mind and how that shows up in the skin. Um, and part and parcel of that is the Figgy Soul element, where we look at what's going on the inside. So it's from a person struggling with panic disorder to others struggling with panic disorder. So it's not a how to, it's not a miracle cure. It's an honest conversation with the things we struggle with every day to peacefully coexist with the way we are wired.
I love that. Well, and I think what's interesting too, because I have multiple chronic illnesses myself. I have IBS, I have I have thyroid disease, and then on top of that, I have just within the last 6 months, I got diagnosed with a skin disorder, and
Oh
it's a
no.
yeah, and that's interesting. And the interesting thing with that is that that is a result of the trauma I put my skin through when I was a healthcare worker. I was a
Mm.
certified nursing assistant for 15 years. And so I think it's important to understand is that the things that we're doing to our body like years ago, we have to be careful. You never know when something else is going to pop up or what really is traumatic to our bodies and our skin because I was just washing my hands. I was a healthcare worker a lot, but the skin disorder I got diagnosed with is just really essentially damage from just the added health excessive hand washing from being a healthcare worker. Obviously need to being careful, excuse me, when I'm caring for my patients to not pass illness. And then obviously with having illnesses of my own and being a primary caregiver now for my husband, I'm obviously still really careful. And so just having to kind of up the ante on how I moisturize and take care of my skin has been very important. And also just understanding what triggers I have, because there's triggers that can obviously trigger the skin as well as stress.
Oh yeah, there are so many things that trigger. And I think the thing that we forget mostly is We're very concerned with the conversation between the mind and the gut as the second brain. We're very concerned with what stress does to the organs and the body, the heart, the blood pressure, the cholesterol. But we tend to forget that our skin is our largest organ. And it's literally, if you want to argue it that way, your most vulnerable organ because it's the one that is the literal barrier between you and the world.
Hmm.
Um, and that keeps everything that's meant to be kept safe inside. So it just makes sense that if stress can affect all of these other core functioning parts of your body, obviously it's going to affect the largest organ of your body.
Yeah, yeah. So, thinking back, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you started to notice. What were the telltale signs that you were noticing that your skin was having issues connected to stress? Like, how long did it take for you to kind of put two and two together? Because obviously, when we think about our skin, we don't always necessarily think that it's stress related. We think, oh, I might have touched something that had a chemical in it, that
Too much
it was,
chocolates or whatever.
yeah, some sort of other trigger that's topical or maybe even ingested. But no one thinks about, like you say, because like with as someone who has IBS, we think about mind, the brain to gut health. That makes sense, and that's more kind of at the forefront of conversation and thinking. But yeah, you don't think about stress being a major factor in that. So could you share a little bit?
Yeah, so what happened to me was, of course, this is just one of the symptoms of my panic disorder. I was diagnosed with panic disorder very late in life, and it goes back to what you said earlier about it's about what you do to the body and the mind in kind of the prior phases of your life that tend to show up later. And that was very much my case. My trauma and abuse history, I, I had thought I had dealt with it. And then, the body remembers and it came back to me in my 30s. And when I got really, really ill and I had my first panic attacks and multiple tests, I was only then diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and later specifically with panic disorder. So in the run up to that, I just conformed to the narrative that I was always told. I'm super sensitive. I have a very sensitive disposition. My tummy and my gut is just really sensitive. Always that word sensitive. And I kind of just started resting in the fact like, oh, okay, this is happening again. My skin feels like it's burning and it's itching. I'm having breakouts, which is abnormal for me. I'm having red patches, um, just kind of struggling, but I never put two and two together. Then when I was diagnosed with panic disorder and I started to learn more about what this is so that I can help myself, I started to understand that this affects everything. It affects my sleep, it affects my gut, it affects my migraines, it affects how I respond to my body being hungry. And then I realized, okay, it's also affecting my skin. And then I just went down the rabbit hole because I felt like there's so much about my disorder I can't control that is not within my control. So I wanted to have something, at least, no matter how small it is, that I could perhaps control. And to me, it seemed like the skin because I could formulate this line. But I started noticing when I started learning how to identify my triggers and then how to help myself deal with those triggers, I started journaling. And I would journal my triggers. I would try and backtrack them to what happened before this happened. And I started noticing a very direct correlation between when my anxiety was at its highest or when I was pre or post panic attack and what the things were that I was writing down about my skin. I'm so uncomfortable, I'm itching everywhere. And what would happen is it would literally feel like crawling sensations all over my body.
Mm,
And I would scratch because I would feel so uncomfortable. I would literally scratch wounds onto my face. Um, so then I started making the connection and thinking, okay, there definitely is a connection. So, how does this connection work? And what happens is when you're so anxious and always in such an anxious state, your brain releases cortisol and adrenaline, right? That shoots through your gut and through your bloodstream to get you ready to fight and to move. And when it shoots from your gut through your bloodstream, it goes to all of your most sensitive nerve endings, which are all located or mostly located beneath the first layer of skin. So it's really a very direct connection between what's happening in the mind and how it shows up in the skin. And when those nerves start tingling and firing and sending the wrong messages, obviously you're going to be really uncomfortable. And that creates an inflammatory response, which can show up differently for many people. If your listeners have psoriasis, maybe eczema, atopic dermatitis, shingles, they may find, if they look back or may already know, that these tend to flare up or feel like it's much worse when they're going through very stressful periods.
Yeah, no, I like that. And well, and I like that you, when you were talking about your experience that you were doing multiple things to deal with the stress to help your skin overall. It's not just I really like how you explored different avenues and that you figured out different avenues to deal with your stress, both in terms of like journaling, watching what you ate, watching what you interacted with, because it could be multiple things and everyone's different. With any illness, the triggers and the symptoms will be different for everybody. And so I love that you just shared that it's different for everybody. And you have to figure out,
Totally. Yeah.
you have to pay attention to what is true for your body. What happens,
Mhm.
do you, like you said, like, where you would, scratch yourself until you had wounds, or maybe, it was just high periods of stress, or maybe it was something that you topically came into a contact with, or something you ate. It could be different for everybody. And kind of putting two and two together. Well, and also too, what came to mind for me is like, even there's so many products over the counter that claim to help like with skin issues and things like that. But like, I don't think people really understand that or take the time to really dig in and do their to pay attention to like looking at the labels and really understand like, okay, it says it's supposed to help with X, Y, and Z skin issue, but what are you actually putting into your body? What are the chemicals and the properties that are in there that actually could make things worse than better? And sometimes the more for me, for me, just actually making sure I was trying different creams, but I actually needed something stronger that was actually more medicated from my dermatologist, and that worked way better than the over the
Yeah.
counter stuff, because it just was making things worse. And then also just understanding that things like that have sense in them for my specific skin disorder,
Yes.
boom, it just makes it worse. So we did a big, massive clean out of our house where we got rid of anything that was scented in terms of not just lotions, but think body washes, hand soaps,
Oh, yeah.
even laundry detergent. I didn't really think about the laundry detergent
Hmm.
until my dermatologist mentioned that to me. It's like, well, think about it. You wash your clothes in such and such product, and then you dry it, and then you put it onto your skin, the residue is still there. And so it's going to come into contact. So if it's scented, it is for sure going to trigger your skin. And then also, again, like you said, with high stress points, as a caregiver, as an entrepreneur, maybe if you're recovering, like you were saying, from like a past very traumatic experience, maybe abuse or something like that, for sure, processing and going through those situations, coping and trying to heal from past trauma, or even just dealing and coping with the current added stress and responsibility of being a caregiver is for sure going to trigger your body to have that fight or flight. And because that's the thing, it's like, when you think of fight or flight, some people maybe have a clenched jaw, or they just clench their fists. Those are more like physical, reactions, but no one thinks about like your skin then just instantly having a breakout, or having those um, responses that way. So stress can be in different ways. Like, it's interesting. My husband has both epileptic and seizure and stress related seizures, and so
Oh,
same
sorry.
same thing.
Yeah.
For some people, when they deal with stress or panic, it might manifest in an actual attack, or it does, like you mentioned, like heart problems or heart
Yeah.
palpitations. Or for my husband, he could have a seizure. And similar situation with his illness is like, I love how you mentioned about how you were journaling and writing down what happened and then tracking it back. I have to do the same thing when he has a seizure, um, to document what's happening, like to track,
Hmm.
like, is this an
Hmm.
epileptic one? Is this a seizure, or excuse me, stress related one? What was the situation? Could it have been prevented? How, so we have information and data to prevent that and try to cope with it better and prevent that situation from getting to such a high point. And so, guys, I hope you're taking this all in, that stress is something that everyone deals with. Stress is something that can manifest in so many ugly ways. And one of the big ways that it can manifest is the skin. And if it is the if the skin is our biggest organ of our body, we need to take care of it well. Because
Oh
as we
yeah.
age, as we get older, and especially even just like with it getting, it gets more susceptible even just with age. As a former healthcare worker, your skin gets thinner as you age, and so the risk of tears is a lot more. And so there's the big introduction of infection and other problems. So if we're not taking care of our skin now, it's definitely going to give us problems later.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of talked about like what some of the possibilities of like triggers and how it and how our skin can just react, our organ can react
Yeah.
to stress. What were some of the things that actually started to help you when you started looking at, like, obviously it's a no-brainer thinking about like what you're putting into your body, and thinking about what you're putting on your body is important.
Yeah.
But where some, and you mentioned journaling, but what are some other things that have helped you with managing your stress?
In terms specifically of my skin or in terms of overall for my anxiety disorder?
I think both, and in terms of your stress, in terms of your skin, because they're all related, right? Like stress.
Yeah.
If stress is the the overall trigger for your skin disorder, and then panic and everything else, it's all tied together. So, what have been some things that have just other things that have helped you just learn to deal
Yeah.
with it, deal with your health in a better way?
So I will preface this answer by saying that I really do believe that everybody is different and different things work for different people. Um, Again, I was diagnosed with a panic disorder, so my situation is a little different. And there are many out there with anxiety disorders that may find what works for me doesn't work for them. But I'm happy to share with what has worked for me so far. It's just important to know that I'm not always in control about what would trigger a panic attack. Learning about
Mm,
my triggers is good, but because it stems from post traumatic trauma, something can link to that trauma event and set me off, and I
mm,
wouldn't even know it. I have to keep that in mind. In terms of my skin, I learned that there are certain things, again, I just went down the rabbit hole, that have been scientifically proven to be common irritants to sensitive skin. So I wanted the Figgy Beauty skincare line to be completely free of that. One of them is synthetic fragrances. So we don't use fragrance in our fabric softener, in our detergent, any soaps, any skincare. Also, essential oils. There's so much evidence for the pros of essential oils, which is irrefutable. But if you have sensitive skin, it does irritate your skin because it comes from plants and flowers which have their natural fragrances,
ooh.
or from fruits that have naturally got exfoliating acids, which you should avoid when you have sensitive skin. The other one is artificial colorants, which have been proven to be a common irritant. So yeah, fragrance, essential oils, artificial colorants, and then a number of other ingredients. But that's only the topical way of looking at things. Internally, you also have to look at some things, which leads to, unfortunately, the dreaded lifestyle changes and mind work. Now, when you have an anxiety disorder like I do, that was the thing I think that one of the things that set me back the most in my healing process. To me, it felt like I was diagnosed with this anxiety disorder and this barrage of tools was just kind of pushed towards me. You need to meditate, you need to exercise more. And I was a very, very active person. And it was so overwhelming because if you're so anxious, sitting still, clearing your mind, and closing your eyes is really, really hard. And if you're wired like me, there's a very good chance you also struggle with persistent and chronic perfectionism. So you're judging yourself pretty harshly on the fact that you're not clearing your mind. You're getting super negative. You're getting very stressed about it. It's so counterintuitive. So for me, the journey was more in understanding what quiets my mind and what methods of that work for me. Sitting still and meditating didn't. Gardening did. Sitting on a swing did. Having a cup of tea, staring out into space worked. So it's more of an active way of doing something that calms and clears your mind. Another important factor for me, and this is something I still learn on a daily basis, it's unfortunately something that doesn't come overnight, was trying to understand my triggers. What triggers these panic attacks? What triggers my anxiety? Um, I've learned that my biggest trigger is either lack of sleep or lack of quality sleep. When I'm tired, I can be assured that I am heading towards a panic attack. I know that that is a huge sign for me. It's a big red flag. So I recognized that's a trigger, so I need to work on my bedtime routine. How do I do that? So you kind of retrace you step back, to get to the beginning point of where the problem is. So the first thing for me was, okay, if I want to have a good bedtime routine, my daughter needs to have a good bedtime routine, because if she's in bed early without any fuss, I can be in bed early without any fuss and not be waking up 100 times a night. Um, I can't be watching screens or having blue lights in front of me or working on emails on my phone or social media. Not that I have, I'm not great with social media, but I can't have that with me. So when I leave the office in the afternoon, the first thing I do is put my phone in a separate room and leave it there until the next morning. I don't, I even try not to read a Kindle. I read an actual book when I go to bed. I have my rooibos tea that I drink. I learned another trigger for me is being hungry, because when I get hungry, I get really nauseous and I get shaky, and my brain kind of connects that to the starting of a panic attack. So I always make sure that I'm eating a balanced diet. I always have protein snacks with me wherever I go. I also recognized that I don't do well with a lot of people or noise or sounds. It's too overstimulating and overwhelming for me. So I needed to teach myself how much of that I can reasonably handle without putting myself over my limitation. And then it started to become to a point where I can handle a little bit more at a time and a little bit more at a time, because I'm figuring out what it is that is triggering me. Um, Another one of my triggers is that I get, especially before I'm having a big panic attack, I get very obsessive and compulsive. And that's one of the key symptoms of a panic disorder. You're highly functioning. You're not as somebody with a generalized anxiety disorder, that you have that constant buzzing and you feel nervous and you're overthinking and like you feel like something bad's going to happen all the time. Most of the time you can handle a lot of stress and you're highly functioning. Then you go into these phases of obsessive behavior and the panic attack hits. So with that one, I need help because I don't recognize that I'm getting obsessive about things, but my husband does. And then he will say, in a nice way, we've learned how to communicate that, I think you need to get out of the house, or I think we need to do something different today to kind of break that cycle. But again, all these things that I'm listing, I was diagnosed with panic disorder in 2015. That's, oh my gosh, that's like almost 10 years ago. And I'm still learning. And I'm still, even though I know some of these triggers, I still get it wrong sometimes. Um, so it's a real journey. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I love, well, there's two things here. I think that that is something I want everyone to, that was good for everyone to hear, is that, of those listening, is that even once you get the diagnosis, whether whatever it is, whether it's stress, anxiety, skin disorder, IBS, epilepsy, stress, stress seizures, whatever it is that that is really the starting line once you get your diagnosis. And your chronic illness never stays the same. It evolves. Sometimes you'll have periods where you have flare-ups, which is not your fault because even though you're
Right.
aware and you're trying to do your utmost due diligence to manage it in a healthy way, you're doing what you can. But even sometimes when you do your due diligence, your body still says, I need a break. This is still too much. I'm struggling. You're going to have those ebbs and flows, and that is not your fault. Okay. It's still important to be on your guard and do your best to manage it and be on top of your needs to manage your illness so it doesn't get out of control, or your loved one's needs so it doesn't get out of control. But you got to give yourself some grace. And because illness can have ebbs and flows, how you manage it is going to change. My husband's on less meds than he was when he started with his epilepsy journey and seizure disorder 5 years ago. And we're still learning, what his triggers are. He's never had the exact same seizure back to back. It's always been different. And so it's an evolutionary process. I'm still recovering with my IBS. I'm having to, I've implemented some things to help me be able to intake some foods again, but then there's other foods I still cannot even go near because then I will have an episode, a gut attack. So, and same thing like with Jeanne, she's like still learning. She's 10 years into her journey and she's still learning.
Mhm.
So, um, just because you find a solution that helps you, it doesn't mean it's one and done, because maybe because of life situations with your family or your personal life or your career, in 10 years time, 5 years time, it's going to change. So then therefore, to be able to manage your illness and deal with it in a healthy way, you're going to need to adjust how you take care of yourself and how you manage those symptoms and triggers. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of life. Life is all about change too, like how we parent and raise our kids. Like my daughter's 6 right now. So the way I parent her now is going to look very, very different when she's 16 in 10 years. And that's normal. And so there's no problem with going with, it's a journey. It's not called a journey for no reason.
Oh
you
yeah, for
it's
sure.
it's a journey for a reason. So you start that journey, you learn things, you apply things, you implement things, you go further into your journey, things change in your life, things change with your health, and you're like, okay, I need to just tweak things a little bit, and then you're back on track. Okay, so if you have a moment where you have a flare up or you've tried something for what you've been doing maybe just doesn't serve you, like with my husband, there's unfortunately with seizure medications, they do have a shelf life for your body, but it's different for everyone. So like
Mhm.
he has, there's one medicine he's been on now for, I'd say like 3 or 4 years, but then there's others that he was only on for like maybe 6 months because we tried it and it just did not work with serving him with getting
Yeah.
his seizures under control. And that's okay. And we moved on to something else. And then as we uncover more things, like you say, like processing and learning about triggers, just only 2 years ago, we just found, we're coming up on almost 2 years where we figured out that he had two kinds of seizures, both epileptic and stress. And we're only 2 years into that journey. And we just started
Mm.
implementing some new medication and other things that we can do to help him with that area. So, and that's still a new process. So there's so many layers to managing
Yeah.
our health. And there's so many seasons in our journey of dealing with our health, or if you're a caregiver like I am,
Yeah.
of learning how to care for your loved one. And I think what's important too is as a caregiver, especially, or if you yourself are the one who is being cared for, having that communication. I love what Jeanne talked about like sometimes, because sometimes we can be so close to the situation that we're so close that we don't see certain things or spot or understand certain things. But I love what Jeanne says, like I may not be able to know that I'm about to have a panic attack, but my husband has picked up on symptoms of like being able to feel lovingly and supportively say, hey, let's take a break, let's take a time out, let's do something
Yes.
different because I see you going down a rabbit hole of trouble.
Yeah.
So, but I want to help you stop it. So having what I call the support, your support network, your caregiver support network is so important, guys. So that can be something very tangible, I think, too. Like, what we've talked about, paying attention to what you eat, what you put on your skin, your surroundings, and any other little things you might need in terms of support, whether it's certain specific medical professionals or medications or specific creams or supplements or whatever that don't have anything in them. Whatever the situation is for you, the big one too for success in managing chronic health is having support. So I would encourage you guys, to those of you listening, if you are in a season where maybe you have done everything, like, and you're actively in a season where you have started leveraging all these different types of other outlets of support and tools and resources, like what Gina talked about, maybe the one that you're missing is support. So maybe it's finding a support group that's on the topic of your specific disorder or illness that you or your loved one's dealing with, because um, it's so important to be surrounded by like-minded people that are actually going through the situations that you're
Mhm.
going through or have similar situations, because it's so much more empowering to be able to talk shop with someone that actually gets it, that goes like, oh, you go through this too, or went through a similar experience. Oh man, I needed that. I need, because then you don't feel like you're, isolated on an island somewhere in the middle of nowhere with no one that understands you. And so, whether that's counseling, whether that's talking with your leader of faith, whether it's actually joining a specific group, like I suggested, with that is on or has members that are dealing with the same situation that you're dealing with, please do so,
Mhm.
because of all the facets of dealing with health, the one facet of dealing with your health that I don't want you to go without is having support, because we can't do it alone. We really can't. And there's no shame and there's no embarrassment and there's no judgment here. Okay. You're not a bad person if you're dealing with a chronic condition. It's not your fault. Okay. And if it is because of past trauma or situations and choices that other people made, um, it's not your fault either. I just want to say that because I've had people close to me that have gone through situations like that, and it is not your fault. Okay, you you can't we can't control what other people are going to do, unfortunately. And I'm sorry to say there is some people out there that have and will do unspeakable and horrible things. And I'm so sorry that you've had, if that's you and that you're listening, that you've had to go through that. Jeanne, I'm so sorry you've had to go through that. But do know that there's hope. Okay. There's hope
Yes.
for you. You're not alone. There's people that want to come alongside you. If it's specifically targeting your skin and maybe dealing with a situation of panic or abuse or things like that, with, Jeanne's here. If you're dealing with caregiving and chronic, just dealing with learning how to be a caregiver with no experience, and you're going like, I'm going clueless here and I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm here. So just be aware that asking for help is actually your superpower. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're incapable. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just means that you're like, you know what? I want to tackle this head on, but I need some help. I need someone that actually has been through this situation before, actually understands what I'm dealing with, and can help me navigate through the ebbs and flows of it. So that's really what it comes down to, right, Jeanne?
I agree. 100%.
All
It
right.
is so important to say that though, because I think when you are in the thick of it, as we often are, especially when you're dealing with some kind of anxiety disorder, it's very hard to see the outside of it and to remind yourself that you are not broken. You may feel broken, but this is not the definition of your journey and who you are. This is like small parts of your uniqueness. And I honestly have so much compassion and empathy with understanding that this doesn't feel unique. It just feels like a curse. And there is a silver lining. You do cross the hill one day and you do realize that there are wonderful, wonderful gifts that come with the things that we feel are so, so challenging in life.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a rainbow. It's cliche as it
Yes.
is, guys. There's a rainbow. And there's things, it's interesting. I was actually, when I was doing my journaling this morning, my devotional journey this morning, that actually came to me. It's like, that's this little nugget the Lord gave me this morning, is that, you know what, there's things in this life that I'm never going to, or I know there's some things in this life that I will never understand, or questions I have that will never be answered this side of heaven. But I just have to trust and put it at God's feet and go like, okay, I will understand it one day. And so, just I hope you guys understand. I hope you guys know that too. Is that we may not understand everything. There's things in this life that do happen. We don't know why. It doesn't make sense. but it's not our fault. So, we just have to to some degree, we just have to be willing and open to just keep putting our one foot in front of the other and just doing our due diligence to do the best that we can. That's all that anyone can do. We're not robots. We're not machines. We're human
Correct.
beings in human bodies. We make mistakes. We learn. We have to figure things out. And sometimes it does mean that it might take a little bit longer than we'd like, than what we'd ideally like. But that's just the way it goes. And there's no shame in that. So I hope you guys are walking away with some elements of encouragement, ideas of how to maybe tackle your own journeys of either whether you're the caregiver or you're the caregivee,
Yeah.
whatever the situation is. I hope you're walking away empowered with some inspiration of knowing that you're not alone, you're doing the best you can, and just being inspired to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and just diving into the rabbit hole of whatever your unique situation is to manage your health better, or if you're a caregiver, managing the care of your loved one better. So, Jeanne, I have really loved having you on the podcast. You shared some
Thank you.
wonderful insight. Where can we, if people are interested in working with you or learning more about your work, your products, how can we connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to figgy.beauty on Instagram and follow us there, link to everywhere you need to be. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Jeanne Retief. You can also go to our website, figgy, Figgi beauty, UK.com. And you can find everything you need there, from access to our Calm Club, to Figgy Soul, to booking me for your speaking events. I do a lot of motivational speaking. And I post about my journey with anxiety disorder a lot on the Calm Club, and yeah, I'd love to see more people there.
Awesome. All right. Well, as usual, y'all, wherever you're watching this, whether it's on my blog, Apple, Spotify, or my YouTube channel, all the good information of how to connect with Jeanne will be linked below. And definitely check out her resources because she's a true gem. She has a lot to offer. And I just really want, if you're specifically struggling with skin issues, just going through um, stress, panic disorder, things like that, I really hope that you will follow Jeanne because I think she could be a good light for you as you're navigating your own journey. So, Jeanne, thanks again for being a guest on this week's episode of the Caregiving and Entrepreneurship Reimagined podcast. I loved our conversation. It was such a pleasure to have you back, to have you with us. And guys, I will see you in the next one. So again, be sure to like, follow, subscribe to the Caregiving and Entrepreneurship Reimagined podcast, and I will see you in the next episode. So take care, guys, and thanks, Jeanne, for being with us today.